Hi, I'm Shelley Fold-Nasso, CEO of the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship. We're looking forward to you joining us for our Hill Days coming up in the very near future. And this video is going to give you some information to help you prepare for those Hill meetings. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how Congress works, or in the case that we currently have, doesn't work very well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how to structure the meetings and how you can prepare for the meetings and how we're going to be scheduling the meetings. In a separate video, I'm going to talk about the legislative ask. So this one's really just going to talk about getting ready for the Hill meetings. So first, just a little bit of background on Congress. There's two houses of Congress: the House of Representatives, which has one representative per district, 435 members, and they are apportioned to the states based on the census. They are elected every 2 years. So every single member of the House of Representatives will be up for re-election this November. And then there's also 6 non-voting members, and we do have some people coming from a couple of those districts. So you can still meet with your representative. They just aren't able to vote. They can co-sponsor legislation. They just can't vote. So the Senate has 2 senators per state, and so there's 100 total. They have 6-year terms, and a third of the seats are up for election every 2 years. So it's probably a good idea to look at your senators and see if they are up for reelection this year and if they're running again, because there's a number of senators who are not running for reelection. And so you're probably already aware of that if you've voted in the primaries or been following the coverage of the primaries. But if you haven't, check on your 2 senators and see if one of them is not running for, or is up for reelection this year, or if anybody's not running. If they're not running for reelection, that's important to know, because a lot of the work we're going to be doing is really laying the groundwork for future years, because it's going to be really hard to get things done in an election year, but we're still advocating for our legislative ask to prepare our members of Congress to be able to be supportive in future years. So if your member's not coming back, it doesn't mean you shouldn't ask them for help. You should definitely still ask them to support the legislation, but it's also good to know when you're going into that meeting if they're going to be back again next year or if they're running for reelection. So right now in the House of Representatives, the Republicans have a very narrow lead in terms of the number of representatives. So the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is a Republican, and if you follow what's gone on in Washington, the first Speaker of the House was ousted, and Mike Johnson's been the Speaker for a little over 3 months now. And there are also 4 vacant seats right now. So there's 218 Republicans, 213 Democrats. So that means the Republicans are the chairs of the different committees. But that very narrow margin makes it really, really difficult to get things done, particularly because the Republicans are not a very unified group at this time. In the past, they have been, and in the last Congress, or even in this Congress, the Democrats are much more unified in how they vote. The Republicans are not. So it's really hard to get things done, and particularly with that very narrow margin. In the Senate, there are 48 Democrats and 3 independents, all 3 of whom caucus with the Democrats. So that basically gives the Democrats the majority, and the Senate majority leader is Democrat Chuck Schumer from New York. And if there is a tie, there's 49 Republicans. If there is a tie, then Vice President Kamala Harris can cast a tie-breaking vote. So that does give the Senate, the Democrats, a little bit of an edge in the Senate, but again, it's very, very close. So how Congress works, and really right now, and we've shown this graphic for a while. I think Congress has been pretty dysfunctional for a while, but I think it's probably more so now than it's been in a very, very long time, at least as long as I've been working on public policy. It's just really hard to get anything done. And as I mentioned before, the parties, the members are not on the same page within their party, and everything is very, very partisan. The bipartisan cooperation is much rarer than it used to be. And even with something like cancer, which shouldn't be a partisan issue, which affects everybody, it affects people of all parties, and we've always been very successful at working with members of both sides of the aisle. It's just much harder now. It really is. And both of the pieces of legislation that we're working on are primarily supported by Democrats. We've tried really hard to get Republicans on board, and we do have one on each of the bills that's on board right now. We'd love to get more support, but it's just really tough right now because they're not working together very well at all. So for those of you who grew up in the days of Schoolhouse Rock, and I know some of you did, and some of you are probably way too young for that and have no idea what I'm talking about, but I did, and I loved I'm Just a Bill, which was one of my favorite Schoolhouse Rock videos. And the video does give a little bit of a simplistic view, but bills are first introduced in committee, and then you have committee hearings and expert testimony, a committee markup with amendments, and then a committee vote, and then it goes to the full chamber for a floor vote. This is how it should work, and in theory would work, but a lot of times it's not really how it works. And in fact, it's a big maze between something getting introduced and getting to the finish line. And what happens now is that bills get introduced and it's really hard to move anything. So when there's a must pass bill, like a spending bill, or often at the end of the year, particularly after an election, there's often a really big bill. People will sometimes call it a Christmas tree bill because it happens at the end of the year and people try to get things into it. So it may not go through the normal process of committee markup and committee hearings, and it may just get attached to something else that has to move, and then that's how it can move. So one of the most important things, though, for any bill to move forward is a show of support with a lot of members co-sponsoring the bill. So if you can have, 100, 200 or more members of Congress co-sponsoring a bill, that signals that it's important, that a lot of members believe in it, particularly if you have members from both parties co-sponsoring it. And that makes it much more likely that it can be considered by a committee and that it can move forward or get attached to something else that has to move forward. So that's why when we go to the Hill, what we're asking members to do is co-sponsor the bill, indicating their support for it. And the more support we have, the more likely we can try to move it forward by getting it through a committee, or getting it attached to another bill that has to pass, or even getting it reintroduced in the next Congress, which will start in January. We're not going to give up, even if we don't get any progress this year, but the more support we have, the easier it is to continue moving it forward. So what role do advocates play? These are a couple of pictures of some of our advocates from last June meeting with Senator John Fetterman from Pennsylvania and Senator Raphael Warnock from Georgia. You as advocates share your story and talk about why something's important. The members of Congress and their staff members spend a lot of time talking to constituents. They have people coming in to talk to them about all different kinds of things that are important to them, whether it be, gun issues or healthcare or, tax subsidies or various different business issues. They get a lot of lobbyists talking to them about a lot of financial or business related things. And sometimes they get really in the minutia of different regulations. And I think that they really enjoy hearing from people talking about more personal stories. And they like hearing from their constituents and putting a face and a story to an issue that they hear about. They're much more interested in hearing about these cancer related issues and policy issues from you than they are from me or from other, from organizations. They want to hear about it from people, the people that they represent. That's why it's really important for you to come here and talk to your member of Congress. They see that you've gone to that trouble and made the effort to come to Washington, D.C. Of course, you can always meet with them in the district as well, and they usually spend the month of August in the district, and during an election year, maybe even longer than that. And you can certainly meet with them in the district and get to know their district staff. But they do really take note of when people travel to DC to talk about something that is really important and that touches everyone. So that's why it's so important that you're coming, and we're really excited to have you, and we're trying to help you get prepared for it and want to be available to answer any questions you have and make you feel comfortable. So a few do's, and then I'm going to give some don'ts for the meeting. So first is to be prepared. You're watching this video, so you're well on your way to that. And there'll be another video that explains the legislative asks and some other things for you to read to be prepared. And then we'll also have some time the day before the Hill visits to ask any questions, to get to meet the other people that'll be in your group. Be on time for your meetings. They have meetings scheduled back to back all day long. Be flexible. So sometimes that means you may not meet with who you were scheduled to meet with. You may have the meeting scheduled and think that the member is going to be there, and then they don't show up because they get called to a vote. Sometimes they're not supposed to be there and they do show up because their schedule changes. So, and then you also may be scheduled to meet with maybe the legislative director, who is kind of a higher level person in the office, and they may not be available and assign you to meet with someone else. Basically, no matter who you meet with, you treat them with respect, because whether they are old enough to be your kid or grandkid, they are there making policy, and they have an influence on what the member thinks and does. So you show them the respect you would to anyone and share your story with them. Sometimes they're going to be very interested in what you have to say. Other times they may not be particularly interested and may seem bored or distracted. You just have to power through it, continue to be respectful, be concise too. You should not expect to have more than 30 minutes. And a lot of times these meetings will be 15 minutes because they honestly sometimes will be in back-to-back meetings all day long. The most you would expect is 30, but sometimes they'll cut you off around 15. So the more concise you can be and make sure you get your points in. And then if you have more time and you can talk about other things, that's great. But if you spend too much time on introductions or sharing your story and you don't get to the meat of it and then they have to go, you've lost your opportunity. Share the spotlight when you're in a meeting for your senators. You will have all the other advocates from your state in that meeting. And for some states, that can be 6 or 7 people. So make sure that that you talk ahead of time. You may take turns being kind of the first person to share your story and to have a little bit more time with the story, but you can't tell a 5-minute version of your story and expect everybody else to have time to tell theirs as well. So we have a video and a worksheet to help you tell a really short version of your story. As advocates, we know you have an incredible story to share from your experience as a survivor or as a caregiver. And there are opportunities for you to share that where you get to talk for 15 or 20 or 30 minutes. That's not this. You're basically telling like the elevator pitch version of your story. And so we have a worksheet that can help you hone that story to be relevant to what you're talking about in these meetings and make sure that everybody has a chance to talk, including the person you're meeting with, because often you want to ask about their connections to cancer. It's a way of helping deepen that connection when you have the meeting. Be responsive. If they ask you questions, try to answer them, but don't answer if you don't know the answer. Don't make something up. Just say, I don't know, and we'll get back to you. And then take down notes and let us know, and we can help you. We can respond to them or help you craft a response. Be appreciative. Be sure to note if they are already supporters of the bill. Go in there and thank them. Don't ask them to be a co-sponsor if they already are one, because then they'll know that you're not prepared. So you'll know in your schedule, it will show you if they're already a co-sponsor, and then you're going in to thank them for their support and ask, and then you want to ask to be a resource to them. You want to say, is there anything we can do to help you? And then use social media. So you can tweet or share on other social media platforms a picture of your visit. Thank them for taking the time to meet with you. And thank them if they decide to support the bill. It's definitely important to follow up with a quick thank you note. And then also, again, trying to build that relationship with the staff member, both in DC and also in the district office. So don't overload the Hill visit with too many issues. So I know that many of you advocate on behalf of a bunch of different organizations, but when you're going into these meetings, you're going as an NCCS advocate. So we're really only talking about the Cancer Care Planning and Communications Act and the Comprehensive Cancer Survivorship Act. So there's 2 bills that we're going to be talking about. There's not really time in the meeting to talk about other things. But if you build that relationship, then you have that relationship. You can go back to them if there's another bill that you're interested in or concerned about, that you can still communicate with them. Don't expect them to be an expert on the issue. They may not know anything about it. You may be meeting with someone who's a health staffer who really knows a lot about cancer policy or health policy, or you may be meeting with somebody who really focuses more on education policy or something else and doesn't know that much about it. I already mentioned, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. Don't worry if your member of Congress can't meet with you. Most of the time they can't. And but meeting with a staff member is just as important because they share those concerns with their boss. And then, of course, don't confront, threaten, or pressure. If they are not responsive, you politely say, thank you, I really hope you'll reconsider, or you follow up and ask them. But they're not always, well, first of all, they're very unlikely to commit in the meeting itself unless the member's there. The staff member generally doesn't have that authority to say, yes, we'll sponsor it. What you would hope to get is that sounds like something my boss would be interested in. Let me talk to him or her about it and get back with you. That's a very positive sign. They're very unlikely to say, yes, we're signing on, unless you have the member there. And sometimes it happens that they do sign on right then and there. But it doesn't mean it's not a successful meeting if they don't. It just takes time and follow up to get them to sign on as a co-sponsor of the bill. So in the meeting, you start with some brief introductions of all of the people in the room, sharing your name, where you live, your connection to cancer, and say that you're with NCCS. You state the purpose of the meeting, which is to advocate for these two pieces of legislation. You share your story, and as I mentioned, there's a worksheet that you can use to help you hone your story and tailor it to the specific asks. There's also a short video that explains the worksheet, but it's also pretty self-explanatory. You can just download the worksheet and fill it out. And then you make the ask. The ask is, and this is a little confusing, but in the House, you want them to co-sponsor the bills because they've both been introduced. Or if they've already co-sponsored, you thank them for co-sponsoring. In the Senate, one of the bills has been introduced and you ask them to co-sponsor it. The other one has not, and you ask them if they would introduce it. This will be on your fact sheet, and you'll have that to refer to. But it is a little bit tricky, but it's also very doable. You can do this. So after the meeting, tweet to thank your legislator for the meeting and restate the ask, send a thank you email, answer any questions that they have, or if it's a question you can't answer, you can share it with us and we can get back to them with an answer. And then of course, if they do take action, you want to thank them. And this is how NCCS recognizes when someone signs on as a co-sponsor. We thank them for co-sponsoring the bill and put their picture up and give them that recognition. So you want to keep that relationship going. So you want to stay engaged with them. You can subscribe to their email list, follow the legislator on social media. That way you'll find out about when they're doing events in the district that you can attend. They do come back to the district almost every weekend. And they, as I mentioned, are there the month of August when they're campaigning, as they will be, as all of the House members and a third of the Senate members will be this year. They're going to be in the district a lot. And you can find out when they're having events and talk to them and get to know their district staff. So you check in with them, you ask to be a resource. If you say, let me know if I can help with anybody, because a lot of times the district staff especially will have a constituent call and they're having a concern. And if they know that you have a nonprofit that you run or that you work with women with breast cancer, or you have a support group, then they may engage you to help. And so that's a great way to be a resource to them. And then you invite them to any events you have in your hometown, thank them, try to meet with them in the district. And then if they do have a town hall meeting or other event, you can attend. So we work with Soapbox Consulting to schedule the Hill meetings. So you will get an email from them about a week before with your preliminary schedule and information on how to view the schedule online. That will not be the final schedule. You'll get the final schedule the night before Hill Day at the symposium. NCCS staff may join you for your meetings. So we will try to let you know that we're going to be joining you so you're not surprised by it, but sometimes things change at the last minute. Veronica and I will pop into different meetings because particularly if your member happens to be on an important committee and it's really, we want to really get to them, we may join you for that. You will not go on any meeting alone. So if you are the only advocate from your state, we will pair you with someone else, whether it be an advocate from another state or somebody else to help you and go with you. You will not go by yourself. We do have a handful of states where there's only one advocate. And so, for example, if you're the only advocate from Oklahoma and then there's another advocate that's by themselves from Nevada, we may put you together and then you go on all of the meetings together. So you may be in meetings where you're not the constituent, but you can be there to back up and help your fellow advocates. In a few cases where we have a lot of people coming from one state, we'll be splitting you up into two groups so the meetings aren't too big, but everybody from the state would be invited to attend the Senate meetings. And then we do have our medical students from the CPAT program joining us again. So some of them may be in your meetings depending on where you live and where they live. We will be having a virtual Q&A session coming up, so check your emails for details so that if you want to ask questions before you get to DC, we will be happy to answer them. But then we also have the prep session on Wednesday evening, June 26th, and you will be able to meet the people who are going with you on your meetings and ask any questions that you may have. Thank you so much for all of your efforts to prepare and for joining us, and we can't wait to see you in a few weeks.